Welcome to Shameless Leadership. I'm your host, Sarah Dean. This show is for women leaders who are committed to advancing both their own leadership and the leadership of those around them. In each episode, I offer practical strategies and inspiring stories to help you become a more confident, compassionate, and curious leader. The truth is, you were born to lead. So let's start now, together. Hello, Shameless Leaders. I'm so happy that you're here, and I'm excited to dive into our topic today. We're going to be talking about how to build trust on your team. So whether you lead a team or whether you're on a team, this is going to be relevant and pertinent. I'm talking about this today because over the last couple of years, 2 to 3 years, I've had the opportunity to build out a lot of curriculum and do different presentations and engage in organizations in different ways where I have talked about trust building in a million different ways from a million different angles. And I've had the opportunity to build out step-by-step kind of module-based curriculum. And as I was working on some of this for a prospective client just this week and like really digging deep into it, I thought, why haven't I done an episode about this? And I recognize how valuable it is to talk about this in a really tactical way. So when we think about building trust, that can seem a little obscure. It's like, how do we build something that can be subjective and that we can never control if someone trusts us, right? Like we can take a lot of different action steps, but at the end of the day, like we don't quite know how to make it happen or if we can get someone to join us halfway in that venture. And so I think it would be helpful to talk about some ways that we can build trust, whether we're leaders or team members, and also understand the importance of building trust and why it has to be foundational. And I can tell you, and I know I'm not the only one, I've worked in a lot of organizations where trust is not present and the wild things that you see happening. It's also interesting to think through not just organizations that I've worked in or that you've worked in, but just different situations you've been in your life. I'm actually in a situation right now where I have the opportunity, I'm in a community that is led by a board, and I have had the opportunity to watch this board function from afar. I'm not involved in the board, and usually I'm a joiner. Usually I'm like, who are these decision makers? I'm like, how do I get involved? But as I've watched this board function over the last 4 years, I'm like, no, thank you. And so it's been this kind of fascinating perspective, I guess, to just like be an onlooker and notice like, wow, there's so many missed opportunities to do things better in this situation. So whether you're in a situation where this is related to your work life, or it could be related to something in your personal life, it could be, a situation with an HOA board, it could be a community board, it could be a church organization or board. There's so many places where we are working in groups of people where there is just total dysfunction with leadership, total dysfunction with communication, and there's no trust present. And therefore, the things we want to get done don't get done. Instead, there's all these other weird things that are happening that are complete distractions and disruptions and really undermine the integrity of the mission of the group and the values of the group. And this can go on for years and years and years. And when we see this happening, people don't want to stick around. People don't want to be a part of anything. People are not invested. They're not engaged. And it's so messy, and it does not have to be that way. So let's dig into what happens when trust comes first, because we absolutely can build trust even in areas. So it's one thing to build trust, like if you're starting something new and fresh, but you can also build trust in areas where trust has been broken, where trust has been undermined. Like it's never too late to start now. And that's what I think this episode will help you with, is how do we go about this starting now aspect of building trust? So when trust is the foundation of a team, a community, an organization, what changes? There's so many things that change, and there's so many opportunities that come from that trust being foundational. Because when people trust each other, we know that it's safe to ask questions. It's safe to be a little creative and think outside the box. It's safe to ask for help. When we have environments where those things are safe, then, oh my gosh, we can make changes and decisions collectively and collaboratively. Even if we don't always agree on everything, we can have productive conversations and productive disagreements, and it doesn't all fall apart. So trust is not this thing that's nice to have. It is absolutely the foundation behind high performance, behind healthy culture, and behind really getting results and outcomes that we want to be getting in any team, organization, community that we're a part of. So let's start first with looking at what trust looks like in teams. So, or let's start first with what a lack of trust looks like in teams. And this part, I think maybe you can laugh along with me a little bit if it's not hitting too close to home in like your immediate life. When we think about lack of trust, we can all think of jobs that we've had where you're like, wow, like that leader or that team, it was such a mess. It was so dysfunctional. I mean, like it's laughable. It's ridiculous. And thank God we're not there anymore, right? And sometimes, for some of you right now, you might be like, I actually am right there right now and I'm not laughing about it. So maybe you don't have the hindsight to be able to laugh in this moment. But I can look back at so many roles that I've had and be like, wow, like those leaders, they didn't know the first thing about instilling trust, and they were not doing themselves any favors. Like they could have gotten so much further. They could have gotten so much more out of their talent pool if they knew how to build trust first, and they just didn't. Maybe through no fault of their own. Maybe just this wasn't part of, and again, I'm thinking of leaders in my realm 20 or so years ago. There's a few that I can think of very glaringly. And we weren't talking about this kind of stuff at that time. And yet, I would still like to think that 20 years ago, like being a decent human being and treating people respectfully, which is foundational to trust as well, like should have been a thing, right? And in the examples I'm thinking of, that wasn't really a thing. So what does it look like when there's not trust? What does it look like when there's a lack of trust in teams? So there's a lot of lack of communication. So there's silence. Like maybe a leader will ask for feedback in a meeting or ask for participation in some way, and like no one wants to say anything. So there's this silence, there's lack of participation. People are closed off, shut down, armored up. So when people do respond to things, you can tell like they're thoughtfully thinking through, like, I'm going to say what I think is supposed to be said right now versus what I really want to say, or versus like, sharing maybe something that's a dissenting opinion or a new idea. But I'm thinking through like, okay, they're asking me this question because they want a specific answer. I'm going to give them the answer they want versus maybe the answer they need, or maybe something that would be new or different, or again, like dissenting or, go against the grain a little bit. Lack of trust also looks like withholding ideas or feedback. So I talked about shutting down, not saying anything, but it looks like having these thoughts and then not sharing them. When we withhold ideas and feedback, what do we usually do with it? In a lot of instances, we take it elsewhere. Instead of going to the source, instead of going to the person who could actually fix the thing, change the thing, the person who actually has power in that moment, we go to our trusty colleague who, works in the cubicle, the desk next to us, like someone we have close proximity to, and we're like, oh my gosh, did you hear what happened? Or, oh my gosh, what do you think about this? So we gossip. Gossiping in the workplace is a symptom of lack of trust. So we gossip and we talk to other people and we create narratives and spin stories that are based oftentimes on assumptions. And these assumptions can be really, really harmful. At the best, they're distracting, but at the worst, they're very harmful and really can undermine productivity. They can undermine our processes and even our outcomes, and put us in a place where our work becomes inefficient because we're operating on assumptions, and our processes then suffer. We have less desirable outcomes because people don't know what's actually going on. People don't have healthy conversations to figure things out before they go to do things. And so sometimes they're doing the wrong thing. Sometimes they're doing things incorrectly. Sometimes they have to redo things because there's not this communication in place. And so instead, we're just having to kind of make up stories in our minds rather than actually having like true information in front of us. There could also be a lot of fear-based thinking. And so with fear-based thinking, when we see this in environments where there's a lack of trust, there's this thought around, well, they don't really care. It's not safe to be honest. No one's going to listen. If I say something, I'll get in trouble, or I'll have a target on my back. Like, we hear that a lot, right? If I go to HR, like, then they're going to come after me. We hear this, but also we see it. I can think of some examples where I've seen this in action, where people have decided like, okay, I've had enough. I'm going to take this to the next level. And then there's some sort of retaliatory action that takes place. And then no one else in the organization is going to say anything, because that just continues to further the like code of silence, only communicate through these gossip channels, because I could lose my job. I could lose my role. I could, have this target on my back. There could be some sort of negative action toward me. The other thing that we see is passive aggressive behavior and communication and unclear communication. So I'm thinking of an instance right now where there was a lack of trust, and every time someone would ask a question, the response from the person in charge, the person who had the power, was always like either snarky or not clear at all. And people didn't know what to do with this information. And so a couple people tried to go to the leader and be like, hey, I'm not quite following this response. Like, could you explain a little bit more? but they kind of just got more of the same. Like they just were made to feel more stupid for asking another version of the same question or for admitting that they didn't understand the first answer. So they started just going to other people in the community, in the organization, to be like, hey, like, here's what I tried to do. I couldn't get a good answer. Like, what do you think about this? How are you handling this? And what ended up happening was everyone ended up kind of outing their stories about trying to communicate with this leader in very similar ways, very respectfully, asking questions about clarification, and all of them getting the same response in which they felt like, disrespected. They felt really silly. They felt patronized. They felt really uncomfortable with the interaction. And then at the end of the day, what we had was this whole culture of people who were talking about this leader, didn't know how to go to the leader because the leader seemed very unapproachable and not open to communicating. And then it created this environment where no one knew how to do the work they were supposed to be doing in the right way. And instead, they were all just really mad and bonding over the fact that they couldn't work very collaboratively with this leader. So then we have this divide where the leader's on an island. Everyone else is like, just like sink or swim together. And that's not healthy, right? And it created kind of this disaster of a scenario and a cycle that kept going and going until someone else had to be brought in to try to put these pieces back together. And none of this was necessary. Like there could have been so much more trust built from the beginning if this leader knew how to interact in more trustful ways. And then the other thing that lack of trust looks like is burnout and emotional self-protection. And so burnout can look like being so tired and so exhausted, but it can also look like being kind of cut off, shut down, isolated, where you're just like, I'm not expending energy or emotion on this. So I'm just going to like do my thing, like put my blinders on, stay in my lane, tunnel vision, and not let people around me distract me or intervene or connect because I'm just in the self-protective mode. And that component of burnout obviously doesn't contribute to trust or team building or collaboration. But we also see burnout that looks like aggression, burnout that looks like exhaustion, burnout that looks like people quitting, burnout that looks like people calling in sick more often, burnout that looks like people missing deadlines or just being in a bad mood all the time or being really not even passive aggressive, but downright aggressive in their communication. All of this contributes to, as I mentioned, poor engagement, a lack of investment, not being excited to do the work, not caring about the work, not caring about the outcomes, not caring about the impact or the mission. And when we see this over time, we can see that there's so much lost potential and so much loss of opportunity. So why does trust need to start with leadership? And then how can leaders start building more trust right now? So trust starts with leadership because when we are talking about creating anything that requires vulnerability, it has to start with the person with the most power. So if you think about this from a parenting perspective, if I'm a little kid and every time I demonstrate vulnerability, my parent yells at me, am I going to keep demonstrating vulnerability? If I'm a little kid and my parent never admits being wrong or never models imperfection, how am I going to know that it's okay to make a mistake or that it's okay to ask a question or that it's okay to be a little messy or fumbly when I'm trying something new? So we know that when someone has power and they don't model any vulnerability and they don't do anything specifically to build trust, we know that the people who have less power then stay very guarded because they don't know what will happen if they model vulnerability. They don't know what will happen if they make a mistake because they haven't seen it modeled. So it's up to the leader to do these things in order to show that this kind of stuff is okay. It's okay to be a human being, that people make mistakes and we still treat them with dignity, that people are imperfect and we still treat them with respect, that people sometimes don't know things, even if everyone else knows the thing, even if it seems totally obvious, and that they're still very valuable, worthy members of our team. So trust comes from it being modeled, not from it being mandated or like a value on the wall that's a rule. Like we trust each other. You cannot demand trust. You have to earn it. I mean, we've heard a million times that trust is earned, right? So what are you doing to earn trust over time? Because the other thing is it's not just like you walk in one day and you're like, you can trust me. And this is always my argument when people come into new environments and they're like, this is a safe place. That you can't say that because you don't know what I need for safety and I don't know what you need for safety. For you to just be like, don't worry, it's a safe place. By what standards? And it's the same thing with trust, for you to be like, you can trust me. And no, that doesn't work, especially if there's a power dynamic or there's a way that you're different than me or have some sort of power or privilege over me. That is earned and modeled over time. So trust is not about just saying I'm trustworthy or saying you can trust me. It's really about little steps over time, which is great because that means you can start those little steps right now today. It's not like you have to go earn a certificate or do this big, huge, grand gesture. It's little steps over time of proving yourself in certain ways and proving who you are, what you stand for consistently that builds trust, right? That leadership, that kind of leadership then sets the emotional tone and sets up the environment of psychological safety, which always has to start at the top. Psychological safety has to come from the people in power because the people in power are the people who have the capability to destroy that psychological safety with one action step or one move, one decision. So we have to look at who's in power and then how are they modeling this? That's where it starts. It's not about like whether my team is behaving with respect. If my team members are not behaving respectfully, that's about me as a leader. It's not about these team members. It's not about like, oh, they're just all whatever generation and they don't respect people. No, it's about how you've set things up on your team and set expectations and built trust with people in order to be able to hold an expectation for them to show up a certain way. If people don't feel safe and if leaders can't acknowledge hard, vulnerable truths and own mistakes and invite feedback and show that they are imperfect people on their own journey of growth, who value growth and value learning and value upholding human dignity amidst imperfection and messiness, then if we can't all agree on that and we can't be coming from that position, then we don't have a starting place. So let's look at what does it actually look like then if we recognize that it has to start with leaders, what does it actually look like to get started? So first is demonstrating some transparency and vulnerability. And what does that look like? That's going to look different for everyone. I'm a pretty open book. So for me, vulnerability in a lot of capacities is not hard. It's not scary. In fact, I like it. I know it's my bridge to relationship building. And that has been extremely rewarding to me over the course of my life. So I start with vulnerability. That is easy for me. But for people who don't do that, if that's something that you haven't practiced over time, it maybe wasn't modeled to you, maybe it wasn't part of your culture, maybe it wasn't part of your socialization, especially if you were socialized as a male, then modeling that vulnerability can feel really uncomfortable and really scary. And it doesn't have to look like walking into a meeting and crying about something, which I think is where a lot of times we get really confused. We're like, okay, if I have to model vulnerability, I have to demonstrate some like very uncomfortable emotion that I don't want to show other people. That's not vulnerability. Vulnerability can be like laughing in front of people. Vulnerability can be telling a story about your dog doing something cute over the weekend. Vulnerability can be, there's such a huge scale and spectrum in terms of how vulnerable something can be. And that's going to look different for every person. And what's appropriate in every environment is going to look different as well. But being able to say like, hey, I took my kid to gymnastics this weekend and they did their first handspring and oh my God, it was so exciting. Like it gave me goosebumps. That's vulnerability for a lot of leaders. That's vulnerability to be like, oh my gosh, I found joy in this thing my kid did. Because if we're not sharing those kinds of things on a regular basis, that's new and different. And it's showing like, oh, this person is a parent and they go to like kids' sporting events and they get all excited and they cheer about it. If that's not something we're seeing in the workplace, that's like, oh my gosh, they're human. This is amazing. Vulnerability also looks like admitting that you made a mistake. Hey, everyone, like I thought doing it this way was the right way. And I thought I had the data and the feedback and the research and all the things. And as it turns out, I think we could have done things a little differently, or I think we could have done it better. Or I've gotten other feedback that's really made me think or see things through a new lens. And I'm so grateful. That like sharing that I maybe misfired on something or that I'm grateful for someone else's feedback, demonstrating gratitude. That's all vulnerability to be like, hey, Chris, thank you so much for giving this extra information. It gave me extra context that really made a difference. That's vulnerability. So it can look like apologizing. It can look like admitting that you didn't get something right or that you don't always get things right. And it can look like asking for help. So asking for help is vulnerability. When we ask for help, we're demonstrating trust. So when I say, hey, can you help me with something? And leaders struggle with this because they think it's weakness. But the truth is it's not weakness. It's actually a demonstration of trust. So when I say, hey, so-and-so, can you help me with this? It's not me saying I'm too weak to do it myself. It's me saying, I trust you enough to meet me in this moment and do something that supports me. And that is meaningful in our relationship. And that is bridge building in a relationship. So asking for help is a demonstration of trust. Asking for help in a strategic way to give other people the opportunity to meet you somewhere, that's vulnerability. And that's modeling vulnerability and creating an environment where you're building psychological safety by consistently giving people opportunities to come into trusting relationships with you. If you are a leader who's like, nope, I got it, I'm fine, I got it, I'm fine, or you're fixing other people's mistakes and you're just doing everything on your own and you're really shut off, then people will feel like you don't trust them and they will not trust you back. And so that trust pathway is where we get to meet each other halfway. Like, hey, I'm trusting you enough to ask you for this. And then that person on the other end is like, oh my gosh, yes, of course, I got you. And then they get to show up and say like, hey, I did it. Or is this what you wanted? Or, here's the thing. So happy to help out. That's really, really hard for leaders. It can be really hard for certain personality types. And it's absolutely the pathway to building trust, psychological safety, and building really strong, authentic relationships in organizational environments. So then what happens when trust is the foundation, when trust comes first, when we are leading with trust, when we're building that before all the other stuff? We have environments where people speak up earlier. So they prevent small issues from becoming big issues. We can head off things going sideways early on. We also have people speaking up and sharing ideas so that we don't go down a whole entire path and then recognize, oh, well, if someone had said this other idea early on, we could have done it a totally different way and had a different outcome that would have been way better. We have people speaking up and advocating for things like keeping us aligned with our values and keeping us thoughtful about, maybe what's happening in the market, or thinking through how can I look at this through different perspectives. So when we have people speaking up earlier, we have so much more diversity of thought, which then hugely impacts the ultimate outcome and how great we can make the ultimate outcome. So in having people speak up earlier, we're typically advancing outcomes in terms of what we're creating, how great it can be, how high we can go with it, how profitable it can be, how far we can take it. When trust comes first, feedback becomes easier and more constructive. So when we have an environment where we're just consistently giving feedback and receiving feedback, it's not weird and awkward because it's happening routinely. It's part of the culture. So people are very open and accepting. When feedback is very inconsistent or it only comes up once a year in reviews, then it's like this big, huge thing. It's this big like elephant in the room, like, oh my gosh, I'm about to get like lectured or, get in trouble for the things that I should have been doing better. In reality, things that come up in reviews should never be a surprise. You should already know. This communication should have been going on for a long time. So you should know going into a review, because you've had all these different conversations around strengths and weaknesses or areas for growth, that like, oh, here's the things I'm working on that don't come as naturally, or that have been a little harder for me in the last 3, 6, 9 months. So that more open feedback on a more consistent basis becomes much more useful, and also takes the energy out of these big moments where where feedback has to take place. And because it's unfamiliar and infrequent, it's scary, it's overwhelming, we don't know how to respond to it, and it feels so much bigger than it needs to feel, rather than feeling objective and like, oh, okay, thank you for telling me that thing so that I can change it today, move on, and we're good to go. And then if there's another thing you need to tell me next week, tell me next week. I'm not waiting a whole nother year to find out, like, did I change the thing correctly? And have another whole big escapade over it. When trust comes first, meetings are more collaborative and less performative. So we talked about if there is no trust and people are just saying what they think they're supposed to be saying, and they're thinking through their responses, being like, okay, this question was asked and here's what I think they're looking for, then that's performative, right? When we have people who are not being performative, we are speaking authentically in communication and interactions and in meeting environments, then we're more collaborative and we're more creative and sparks start to fly. And we have people working together in ways that are energy inducing and generative in terms of thought production and work production and efficiency and effectiveness. So we're looking at meetings and environments that are generative versus sometimes dysfunctional or degenerative. We also see innovation increase because people are able to take more risks. And of course, that can absolutely mean more failures. But you know what? Failures create so much opportunity for learning, so much opportunity for growth. And oftentimes, those failures happen fast in safe environments we get to fail fast because we put everything out there. We figure, oh, like, actually, that wasn't the right thing. We quickly, because of the foundation of trust, we can quickly shift, pivot, reiterate, and get right back to work. When we don't have that quick innovation in that innovative environment, then we get so far down a path that when something does fail because a risk was taken, it is much harder to recoup the cost, the time, the energy, the resources. So we want to create that environment where innovation can come fast, we can take creative risks, and then we can reiterate quickly. And that's how we stay in momentum. That's how we're on a constant upward trend versus putting so much into limited innovation and then having it fail and then being back at the drawing board and having lost tons of time, energy, effort, and resources. And then when trust comes first, cohesion and collaboration, community and connection all grow. So that gossip stuff, it doesn't need to happen because everything's out in the open. Now, that doesn't mean it will never happen. There's still, certain personality types are always going to want to be talking behind people's backs, but there's going to be far less of it. It's not going to be a culture of gossip. It's not going to be an us against them. It's not going to be the situation I explained where you have a leader in one place with this huge divide or chasm and then the team in another place, and there's no appropriate or healthy communication in between. So there's far less gossip, far less division, way more partnership, way more collaboration. So how do we get started? I've given you a couple little ideas already for how to get started, but let's look at a couple other ways. So first of all, looking at running a team trust diagnostic. So looking at really getting a significant pulse check on what does trust look like in this organization? How safe do people feel? Do they feel safe to speak up? You can create a very short survey around this or put it in part of a bigger survey if you do surveys on a regular basis. But just let people know, like, we're doing a team trust diagnostic and we're going to do this every quarter or twice a year, or however often you want to do it. And have 5 items on there where they're ranked on a scale of 1 to 5 from an agree to disagree scale. So strongly agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. And then you have people rate these 5 things. So I'm going to tell you the 5 things. You can write them down, put them on, get them in a document, get them in a Google form. So first thing, people follow through on commitments. So your first team trust diagnostic is people follow through on commitments. On a scale of 1 to 5, how much do we see people following through on commitments? The second thing, it's safe to admit mistakes. Third, disagreements are handled respectfully. Fourth, people give honest and constructive feedback. And 5, I feel safe being vulnerable and asking for help. You can do this anonymously. This does not need to be like where you have names and then you have to do like tons of one-on-ones or therapy, you can do it anonymously or don't. That's up to you. But the data that you get is going to be really valuable either way. So don't feel like you have to do it with names. I would suggest doing it anonymously if you really want the true raw data. So you get that information, and no matter where it lands, no matter what measures you score well or not so well on, you have a starting point. Okay. So that's the first step, is just knowing where you're starting, knowing that, oh, wow, I didn't know people thought this. I didn't know people felt this way. When we don't even know, we can't create action steps. We can't create growth if we don't know where we're starting. So while this might be uncomfortable, this is the starting point. Being able to objectively look at, like, this is the starting point for better or worse. We're going to move up from here. We're not going to beat ourselves up on, in terms of where we're at right now. Then the next piece is looking at yourself as a leader, if you're someone in a leadership role, and looking at where might I unintentionally be undermining trust, and looking at maybe some of your own idiosyncrasies, looking at some of the things you tend to do, knowing the things that trigger you, knowing the things where you maybe have reactive responses that might shut other people down. So maybe you're someone who, jumps in and overspeaks. Maybe you're someone who shows when you're frustrated, cranky, or irritable. Maybe you're someone who yells in the workplace. Maybe you're someone who shuts down when you're in a bad mood, or when you're really tired, or you're having a bad day, or having personal stuff going on. You shut down and people don't know what to do with that. So just knowing what are some of the ways that I show up that might be limiting how trust is being built on this team. And then looking at, how am I doing some of the things we talked about earlier? Like, how do I model imperfection? How do I demonstrate vulnerability? How do I apologize, admit to mistakes, admit I don't always get it right? How do I ask for help and ask people for help publicly so that people know that, like, hey, I'm looking to invest in others. I'm demonstrating trust by asking others to get on board with me. And then giving yourself permission to start small. So starting small, modeling vulnerability a little bit at a time, asking for feedback, and starting with the people that you trust the most who are in that inner circle, starting with the people who will hold space for your vulnerability if this is hard and uncomfortable for you. And then giving yourself permission to name that discomfort, to be like, hey, this is uncomfortable for me. This is awkward. I haven't done this before. Like, but this is really important to me. You can build so much integrity by saying, and this is such a great model of vulnerability, to say, hey, this feels really uncomfortable to me, but it's important to me that I get it right. Or it's important to me that we start doing things better. Or it's important to me that people feel that there's trust here. So I'm going to name that I'm feeling uncomfortable right now, but I also want to do a better job. That's a massive demonstration of vulnerability that builds credibility. It builds authority. People think that, again, this can be a sign of weakness or you're so soft. No, think about the relationships that you want to engage with. The people that you want to engage with in life are the people who are able to say, hey, I don't always get it right, but I want to be in it with you. Versus people who are like, I always get it right. I always know what I'm doing. And I'm not here for questions and concerns. Like, no one wants to engage with that person. So are you sometimes that person or a form of that person? And where do you need to maybe do some shifting to be the person that people want to be in a relationship with, that people want to be in an environment where we're co-creating on a regular basis? And then the last piece of this, in terms of what you can be doing and how to begin, is making your values visible, which in most cases, team values are visible. First of all, having team values. So having team values, first of all, and then making them visible. And in many cases, they are visible. But here's the really big piece: making them actionable. So they are actionable values. People know how to uphold the values. They know the specific ways. So the values listed there, like, kindness. What are the ways that we model kindness? What are the specific behaviors that we exhibit to model kindness? Maybe it's innovation. Great. What are the ways that we uphold innovation? What are the ways that innovation is present in different ways? How do we make space for it? Like, what are the literal steps for innovation in this company, in this organization? So these values are not just on the wall. They're not just posted. They're not just on a website. They're not just in like the email that you got the first day you joined the team. They're not just aspirational. They are actionable. So the last thing I want to leave you with is that trust is not soft. Vulnerability is not soft. It is strategic. And it doesn't mean that it's strategic in a way that you're going to use it or leverage it in an unethical way. It's strategic in a way that being able to build trust is your bridge to building relationships, and being able to build relationships is your bridge to getting better outcomes. So, and building relationships in an authentic way, right? So this is all about doing this with authenticity. So this is not about soft skills and becoming more weak and like crying at work. It's not about that. It's about strategic relationship building. It is about strategic humanity. It's about strategic acknowledgement of the human condition, because that's how we get better together. So I want you to think about what is one thing that you can do in the next few days where you can work to build more trust on your team. What's one step that you can take to model vulnerability, to show up in a way that maybe is a little bit uncomfortable, but starts to build this trust? And then from that step, you can take the next step, one step at a time. If you need help with this on your team, this is something I'm actually increasingly helping organizations with, please reach out. I would love to talk. I'm doing all sorts of different leadership development work around trust building, around building psychological safety, around navigating healthier communication within teams and between teams and leaders, because so many places want more of this, but it is challenging and it is uncomfortable, and it can be very difficult to do old things new ways. And so if you've been doing something for a long time the same way, it can be really tricky and challenging to start to make those changes. And I love coming in and being able to help with that. So you can always reach out at hello@sarahdean.com. We can talk about it. Thank you for being here. Share this episode with other folks that you know, other leaders that you know, or people on teams who might be struggling with leaders, so that we can all be working on this collaboratively and together. Thank you for being here, and know that I'm in this with you always. Thank you for allowing me to spend time in your ear today. If you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe to this channel. To learn more about my speaking, training, and coaching services, visit sarahdean.com. That's SARADEAN. I would also love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn at sarahdean.com/LinkedIn or on Instagram at sarahdeanspeaks. I love hearing from my listeners. Thank you for showing up for yourself today. I see you, I hear you, and I'm holding space for you today and every single day.